Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hoosier Homestead. I'm Alex. It's been a little bit since I've done one of these video vlogs, and so just had a lot going on with life and family. We actually bought a house, and so most of my time has been figuring everything out with that, with the sale of our house, purchase of the new home, inspections, getting everything paperwork wise done. But I think we're on the right path, hoping to close officially here the next month or so, and then probably move in first of the year. So that's exciting. But since it's been a little bit, thought I'd just do another video vlog of a book haul, I guess, book review. Um, Talk about what I've been reading, any upcoming books that I've got at the library from little free libraries, all that stuff. Um, so just jumping right in, I recently started reading Memorials. My book's upstairs, so this is just the dust jacket, by Richard Chismar. Kismar, I'm not sure how you say his name. So I've read a few of his books. I think he has the Gwendy Button Box trilogy. It was okay. It kind of read like a young adult fiction, I think, and this has kind of been the same way. But it's interesting. It's this group of college kids that in the 1980s, I think in Pennsylvania, they drive around the state looking for like roadside memorials, like where you see the crosses and stuff. And there is these symbols on each one of these crosses, and it's not to spoil it, but it gets kind of weird, and there are some weird people involved, kind of like a cultish type thing. So it's an interesting book. I'm about halfway through. Things are kind of starting to pick up a little bit more. Things are a little slow in the beginning, but I anticipate the ending being this is kind of the climax, and so I'm looking forward to that. Another one I started this week is The Last Kind Words Saloon by Larry McMurtry. It seems like this is a pretty short one, but it follows a few different characters in like the 1850s Texas West. Um, it does involve Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. I think that's who it is. Yeah, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. So I really liked Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This one's not quite as good, but of course Lonesome Dove is like my favorite book now, and so it's hard to meet that level, but it's not bad. Each chapter is really short, which I kind of like. Each chapter is like 3 pages long, and so it's nice to have those shorter chapters to have good stopping points. And so I really like that in a book. And each chapter is kind of like a different vignette, I think is the word. It's almost like a different story. They're all connected, but each chapter follows a different set of characters. So that's interesting how he writes that. So looking forward. I'm only like 6 chapters in to that one. These two I got at a little free library here in town just recently, and they're both Mitch album. So this is Tuesdays with Maury, and then this one is The Five People You Meet in Heaven. So I've not read these. The only Mitch album book I read was The Little Liar, and that is about kind of the story of 4 people that survived the Holocaust. And so it was really good. I really liked his writing in that book, and so I'm looking forward to reading both of these. Um, and they're both pretty short reads, so I like I like having those shorter stories to kind of break up the longer ones, the 500-600 pagers, which is nice. Um, this one, I think it was this one, actually has like a note. I don't want to share too much information with what the note is, but I always like seeing handwritten notes in books. It's clearly meant for someone. They bought this book for a person and then they wrote them a note, and it's dated June 2000. That's like 24 years ago. And so it's just nice hearing that story. And then they put it in a little free library, and now I can enjoy it. And the way our little free libraries work, if you don't already know, or if you don't have those in your area, they're just these boxes people put up in their yard or like church parking lots or stuff like that. And you can leave a book, take a book. Nobody monitors it. It's not like you can only take so many books per time. But we usually, for every couple books I leave or pick up, I usually try to leave a couple books, and so it's just a nice way to exchange books in the community. So I really like using those instead of buying the books. Obviously, this is free; it's a free little library, so that's nice to save some money too. This one my mom got me at a garage sale, so shout out mom, thank you for that. Uh, When the Wind Blows by James Patterson. So I've only read a few of his books. His writing's okay. I think the two I actually read were the ones he wrote with Bill Clinton, The President's Daughter, or something like that. The President's Missing. The one thing I do like about James Patterson, it looks like this book is the same as those other two I read, or his chapters are like, again, 3 or 4 pages long. Which, of course, I like because they're nice stopping points. So, not sure what this is about. It kind of reminded me of The Shining, just kind of that winter haunted house hotel looking thing. So the cover just looked interesting. So we'll see what that's about. Another library pickup I checked out from our library is Victory City by Salman Rushdie. I think this is his newest book. I've only read Midnight's Children, and his writing's kind of different than what I'm used to, but it is a nice little challenge. I think every once in a while to have something different, and so this is a fiction. I think it's a fantasy. It's almost like an Indian fantasy. Um, so it just sounded interesting. The cover looked cool. So we'll see what that's about. I'll probably start this after I finish the Larry McMurtry one. So we'll see how that goes. The rest of these are all little free library pickups as well. I thought this one was really interesting. So this is a book of the month pick from like 2020 by Riley Sager, who is kind of an up and coming author. They've got a few um, more A-list books, I guess, now. But I think this is probably one of their first ones, Home Before Dark. I have no idea what this is about, but the author and the cover really intrigued me, so we'll see. The way, if you're not familiar with Book of the Month, so that's their logo there. And then it also says on the back the date, so June 2020 is when this came out. I think they come out with like 4 or 5 books a month, and you pay like $20 or $30 or something like that per month, and you get to pick one book or 1 or 2 books, whatever it is, and they send you those books to your house. And so it's a monthly subscription, basically, like a monthly book subscription. Um, I think they all seem to be kind of more newer, like not as well known author books, um, to try to get the word out for new authors, which I think is great. And so it's a little expensive for me to do, but I like how they structure it. Each book is a different genre, so they might have like a thriller, then they'll have a romance, then they'll have a fantasy, and then they'll have maybe a nonfiction. So I think that's cool for anyone that might want to get into reading more. The Book of the Month Club might be for you, so check that out. The second one that I got called Sign Here by Claudia Lux. It's kind of a different cover. Um, Again, I have no idea what this is about, but I like how it's a Book of the Month Club book, and it looked interesting. The cover looked interesting, so we'll see what that's about. The Final Girl Support Group is another one I got at a little free library by Grady Hendrix. I think they wrote How to Sell a Haunted House or something like that, which is another one on my to be read list. And so, again, this cover just looked cool. But the back says, in horror movies, the final girls are the ones left standing when the credits roll. They made it through the worst night of their lives, but what happens after? So we will find out what happens after, hopefully. This is another James Patterson book. I forget where I got this. Probably a little free library. I don't think I bought this one. It was either that or maybe a cheap garage sale buy. But Crosshairs, it's a Michael Bennett thriller. And he wrote this with James O. Bourne. So it seems like James Patterson writes a lot with like other authors, which I think is great. I mean, everyone has their opinion on that. I don't know how much Patterson actually writes of the book when he co-authors these. It might just be a plug for this new author to put James Patterson's name on there so people will buy it. But regardless, it gets their name out there, so I think that's great. Um, and so a Michael Bennett thriller. Hopefully, this isn't something that I have to read something else and I'm not getting into the middle of a series. I don't think it is. Usually they'll tell you it's part of a series, but I'm guessing Michael Bennett is just a recurring James Patterson or James Bourne um, character. So we'll see. Last one I got here, maybe save the best for last. We'll see. And it's missing the dust jacket. It's just the hardback. It's The Regulators by Richard Bachman. So if you don't know who Richard Bachman is, you should look him up. It's interesting, his story. So spoiler, it's Stephen King. Richard Bachman is another alias, pen name, I think is the word. So in the 70s and 80s, Stephen King's publisher actually told him to slow down his writing because he was pumping out like several books a year. And so he started writing these books under Richard Bachman. So I don't know why they told him to slow down, but the other book that this matches with, so I think he came out with this one and one called Desperation, which is by Stephen King, the same like day. So he came out with The Regulators and Desperation at the same time. Desperation I did read, and it's about this town in like Nevada, I think, or Nevada or Utah, and a lot of weird things are going on. A sheriff like goes crazy, pulling people over and locking them up in jail. And so it's like a supernatural thriller. And apparently, The Regulators, which again he came out with on the same day, has the same characters, but it's in like a different, like a parallel universe. And so I might have to revisit Desperation again or read the Spark Notes before I read this one. I've heard Desperation is better, the better one of the two. I guess we'll find out. I really liked Desperation. That was one of my favorites of his. I listened to the audiobook earlier this year, um, which I still think counts as reading. I know there's a lot of debate on whether an audiobook counts as reading a book, and I definitely, you're consuming content that has been written, and don't let anyone tell you that listening is different than reading. It is different, but it still counts. I mean, so yeah, excited to read this one. So we'll see how that goes. Those are all the book pickups I've had in the last few weeks. Um, I'm really excited for all these. I did try to start on my Kindle, which I might come back to it. 2 books actually. So I was reading A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, and it really just wasn't doing it for me. I I got probably 30%, 35% through on my Kindle, and I stopped reading it. I read something else, but then I'm like, maybe I'll come back to it. So I started reading again, and then I maybe got 40% through total, and I couldn't do it. I think she goes back into like the lore of like the background of all these courts and the history, and I just wasn't interested in that. And so I'll probably come back to it at some point. I think the stories are interesting. I mean, I want to read the rest of the series, and she's got a 6th one coming out next year in 2025 sometime. So I'll come back to it at some point, just not right now. You can probably hear my cat in the background. Um, Another book I tried to start reading, which I'll probably come back to, is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I've been wanting to get into that for a while, and I read the first chapter or like the prologue or something. And again, I think it was one of those things. I was listening to it at the same time I was reading it, and when you're listening to a fantasy like that, it's hard to like match the names up because they're usually like not real names or not like common names anyways. They're fantasy. And so I think I'll probably just, it's also like a 1,200 page book or like 1,000 page book. And so I'm like, if I'm not feeling it now, 50 pages in or whatever it was, I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to get 200 pages in and feel like I have to finish it. Um, so I'll come back to it probably next year sometime. But that is, again, why I like breaking things up with these shorter books. So that's why this Larry McMurtry one um, is only like 200 pages, but the margins and the spacing is definitely like very on my side. And so, I mean, you can read a chapter in like 2 minutes. And so that's nice with the short chapters and the spacing. I think once I actually get into this, once I finish Memorials by Kismar, I will dive into this a little more thoroughly, um, get that wrapped up, and then I don't know what's next. Probably the Salman Rushdie book or one of these Book of the Month Club books. We'll see. I am trying to be a little more intentional about um, slowing down my reading. I get in this habit of reading like 4 books at one time or listening to a bunch of books, and it's just not worth it. I think I need to. That'll probably be one of my New Year's resolutions is to slow down a little bit, take in one at a time, like read slower. And so, because I read as fast as I can, so I can consume as many books as I can. Um, and I think you just miss stuff doing that, and you miss the author's prose. And so I need to slow down a little bit so I can um, get more into just enjoying reading and not reading as much as I can, if that makes sense. Um, I think that's about it. Like I said, we just bought a house, and we're probably going to be closing here in the next month and a half, and so we'll probably put a video up of the new spot. My wife Sarah is really excited about the garden and planting some orchard, some like fruit trees, and so definitely looking forward to having. It's out in the country, so looking forward to having a quieter life than being in town. So yeah, I appreciate you watching this far. If you have this far, give us a like and a subscribe if you want to see some more of this content. And thanks.